Okay, this video is going to be on the power to repeal. So previously I was talking about Jefferson, who said that constitutions and laws and debt die after 19 years or expire, he says, after 19 years. And the new generation of people are not bound by old laws, old constitutions, or old debt. So in his letter that where he talks about this, he writes to James Madison. This is Thomas Jefferson writing to James Madison. Thomas Jefferson is in Paris, and it's the year 1789. And in this letter, he talks about the power to repeal, meaning the power to end the old things. So the power to repeal is exercised in one way through inaction. So when Biden came out with his executive order, and Ron Paul has been saying for a while that the most powerful word in the English language is no, that's basically a repeal. It's saying no. So that would be inaction, just not complying. So to enforce or follow a law is to legitimize it. Not to follow a law is the exercise of a repeal. Repealing of law is exercised through inaction. So an action equates to a repeal. However, there's an issue that comes up that does so in many other problems with the sovereign states or the independent states and the federal government. The sovereign states had a right to repeal any law passed by the federal government. Lincoln changed this when he took over the free states by force and enlarged the jurisdiction of the federal lands in the dependent states, limited to federal lands, taking over the sovereign state by force. Now, when I say sovereign state, I'm talking about what's referred to in the various government writings, which is the states that created the federal government. Those are the sovereign states. He took over these states, Lincoln did, by military force. The sovereign states had the right to repeal any law passed by the federal government. Lincoln changed this when he took over the free states, which are the sovereign or independent states, by force and enlarged the jurisdiction of the dependent states, limited to federal lands, taking over the sovereign state by force, thus illegitimizing or eliminating the sovereign states who had a right to repeal laws of the federal government, instituting a military state under federal control, and then having the ability to pass any law without disruption or problem. This also means that the state created by the free people no longer existed, which also means that the people truly have no voice, which equates to a lot of problems, including taxation without representation, as we know is mentioned in the Articles of or the Declaration of Independence as one of the grievances the colonists had against the king. It's my opinion that most people simply have no idea and can't imagine the level of tyranny that's occurred in this country, from taking over the states, to taking over money, to taking over education, to taking over the family, taking over all the laws, all the lands that rightfully belong to the inhabitants and settlers or occupants, and instituting corporations and charters to which some claim the legislator has no right to repeal the contracts with them in the Constitution. Two problems, and these tyrannical things being the case for so long that most people feel they are right and this tyrannical system is the way it's supposed to be. So it's gone on for so long that most people can't see the way it's supposed to have been, or the way that it was ran for many years before the Lincoln administration. With the Lincoln administration, along came a lot of problems, and there's books written on this by a guy named Thomas DiLorenzo. And a while back there were YouTube videos where he spoke on Lincoln and the things that he did and his associations and how all of this tyranny came about through Lincoln. So if you want to know more particulars on this subject of Lincoln and the illegal states, I've done other videos on it, but also Thomas DiLorenzo has a lot of stuff on it. So most people feel that they're right in how they're perceiving this current system, and they do it because they just have no idea of how it was supposed to be or how it was being done, because it's been being tyrannical for the last 170 years, and it's got them bound mentally, and because it occurred slowly, they just don't see anything wrong with it. So the power to repeal, being a natural law, is inherent in the people, is inalienable, or unalienable as some people say, is a part of the do no harm principle and the right of self-defense. It's the natural right not to be bound, and the right to a natural person to unbind themselves, to declare by way of declaration that we common people, the inhabitants and settlers of any territory in any part of the world, are free, sovereign, and independent, are living, and that we have inherited the earth, and the earth serves the living, the waking, not the sleeping or the dead. It has been said that of the many reasons the Roman Empire fell, one of those reasons was the refusal to repeal the edicts of tyrannical emperors. So you've heard the saying, the only way for evil to continue to exist is for good people to just do nothing. So this is something that was written in a book on the fall of the Roman Empire, is that the empire would not repeal the tyrannical edicts of emperors. Therefore, it's not only a right to repeal, it's a duty to repeal unjust laws, vague constitutions, orders of tyrannical governments, or even just things that you don't agree with, because every generation has a right to create new customs, and customs are considered law. It's called law custom. Or we condemn the innocent, which makes those of us who do nothing guilty. So this is a maximum law. When you let the guilty people go free, you condemn the innocent. So when our generation allows guilty people to continue tyrannical behavior, we are condemning the innocent people in the future, including our children. So when we do nothing, we condemn the innocent, the children, and the future of this country. John Locke states in his second treatise of government, chapter 2 of the state of nature, Locke states that man may dispose of his possessions, but he has no right to destroy himself. Therefore, liberty is the right to self-preservation. Today, the government, so destroying liberty, you destroy your self-preservation. You destroy good. If you don't end bad things, you destroy liberty, which destroys good. Today, the government of the federal lands has stated that no person may use violence against it or take up arms against it, yet these statements are against nature and against the foundations of law. They are against the Constitution, which appears to be a document to which is in harmony with natural law and the foundations of law. Man, being bound to self-preservation, must take arms against those who threaten to harm him. That is the natural law. That is what's required of him by nature, and nature's God. The foundations of law are many, to which all men the right to self-preservation, gives all men the right to self-preservation, among them to control those things that they create. All men are equal. Everyone is the ruler and empire of his own affairs. A matter performed among some persons ought not to hurt others. One generation cannot bind the next. A servant cannot be made master of his master, so a servant cannot become his master's master. A tenant cannot make himself a landlord. The dead cannot inherit the earth. Do no harm. It is the right of every man to arm himself against the armed. No man is required to arm his enemy. No man is required to speak against himself. He causes an injury who does not oppose it when he can. Sir, while you're considering which of two things you should teach your child first, another boy has learnt them both. This is from the Life of Johnson by Boswell in 1791 and by Thomas Jefferson. I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing, and as necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Unsuccessful rebellions indeed generally establish the encroachments on the rights of the people which have produced them, An observation of this truth should render honest Republican governors so mild in the punishment of rebellions as to not discourage them too much. It is a medicine necessary for the sound health of government." End quote. The idea of repeal is also in the Declaration of Independence, as Jefferson stated, "The natural law of repeal, as governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute a new government." If a government is tyrannical, Jefferson was smart enough to know that, in fact, if a government needed to be altered or abolished, there's no way a person or people could be expected to get permission from that government to end it. You don't ask permission to alter or abolish it, you just do it. The way now is the same way it was then, through a declaration. Either you declare your independence, you declare your intention, you declare your repeal of a law or act for yourself individually or for society. Okay, so the right to repeal is a natural right, according to Jefferson. It's a right that he alludes to in the Declaration of Independence. And as I stated before, the founders were not people to insult your intelligence, so they wouldn't write redundant and elementary things in their papers. They would expect that you would know some of these things. Our education system has been taken over, and so people they're not taught these things anymore. And the schools used to be run by the community, the local community, the societies, and they aren't anymore. They have boards, and it goes to the state, and it goes to the feds, and the states were taken over by the feds, so it's really all just the feds. So it's all sort of laid out in a way where they don't just come right out and tell you a repeal is done in this way, something is done in this way, and something else is done in that way. But a good thing to study would be the maxims of law, and those are the foundations of laws. Those are the absolute truths, and tend to be more in harmony with nature than most of the other laws written by governments or fictions, artificial beings today, which is much of what the government writes as laws for us to follow. They're contrary to nature, and because they're contrary to nature, are considered a possibility. Self-liberty is the right to self-preservation, and we're required to pay a tax that's 20% and possibly soon to be upwards of 60%. Wouldn't that be an impossibility, since you're going to have to sacrifice the well-being of yourself and your family, which is liberty, to do the right thing, to be a moral person? The natural law, you have to sacrifice that in order to comply with government dictates, which are tyrannical, in which it is our duty, not just our right, to alter or abolish them because they cause injury. And we cannot condemn future generations. We have to consider that an actual law, even if it's written or unwritten, is we have to have these principles that we lay down for ourselves to follow as law. And so when we have a tyrannical government, we have to take it upon ourselves to consider it not just our right, but our duty to repeal their laws, to write declarations, to whether it be a declaration of independence or whatever declaration you write, you have the right to declare that you're not going to follow a law, either in writing or in action. Okay, so it's our duty. It's our duty to make sure that tyranny in our generation continues not to exist, so that we can follow the maxims of law, which are to control our creation and to keep the future from being injured by these tyrannical systems, by the overwhelming debt that's been placed. You know, you can go look on the debt clock, and it'll show how much each citizen owes and how much each newborn owes, I think, and how much each state owes. So they consider us bound, which means that if we're bound, that's one thing. But if the future continues to be bound, and that's every 19 years is a new generation, according to Thomas Jefferson, then we are injuring our children and the future. So we are allowing an injury to be caused by the future, by now, for the future. And so the earth will belong to the dead and not the living, because the dead has acquired the debt, and now the future, the living, will have to pay for it. So it's a right and a duty to repeal unjust, tyrannical laws, constitutions, debt, anything that they're doing, so that the earth can continue to belong to only the living. Okay, so like, share, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some information out of it. And if you'd like to see more, I post a lot of videos on my channel. And have a great day.